What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today's Bryan and myself, and we are going to talk a little about some upcoming strength cycle design for the end of Bryan's diet, a little bit about training specialization cycles, in that as your training age increases, the amount of time you allocate to achieving a goal or seeing tangible progress with a certain part of your physique, strength, adaptation, etc., may take a little bit longer. Before we dive into these things, Bryan, what's the latest with you?
Well, I'm looking at myself in this video as it's looking back at me, and I feel really small right now. And in fact, I am small right now because I just weighed in this morning at the leanest that I've been since 2015. So I was 183.4 pounds, and this comes 2 days after I was 186.6. So that's a 3.2 pound drop in 2 days. And I knew this was coming for whatever reason. I've been talking about it in my stories, right? So I dropped my calories from about 2,700 calorie average to 2,300 average 6 or 7 days ago. And since the day that I dropped them, the scale increased every single day. It went all the way from 183.6 to 186.6, 3 pounds in 6 days, every day, linearly, half a pound every day. And I was like, what is going on? I really hope that I don't need 1,900 calories and really 2,300 calories is a surplus or whatever. But I trusted the signs that I was hungry, that I had low motivation, that I felt like I was in a deficit. And I just trusted this for a whole week. And then suddenly it was a 2 pound loss yesterday and then another pound loss today. So I feel slightly vindicated. I feel relieved. And I think that everything is on track for me to do what I talked about last episode, which was kind of eat up into my photo shoot. And my plan, as long as the scale doesn't do anything crazy on me, or even if it does, I might still do this because I feel like I'm close at this point. But I'm going to just add 30 to 50 carbs each day for 4 to 5 days. And that would essentially put me at 500-ish carbs the day before the photo shoot. Going to do my absolute best not to have fat come with that, because that was the problem a year ago when I loaded for my photo shoot. I went into it with the best intentions of trying to just do it with carbs, but a little butter in my rice here, or something there, and maybe 2% milk with my cereal instead of skim milk. And before I know it, it was not all carbs that I was that I was surplusing with, and I felt like I looked a little watery and not very full in the places that I wanted to be. So for whatever it's worth, I'm going to try and do it a little bit better this time. And that's pretty much the update now. I'm just really excited to get back to eating in a, I guess, progressively increasing manner starting on Thursday, which is in 2 days.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's super near. One question I have for you: how much variation is there in your day to day of food selection of the last 4 or 5 days?
Yeah, not any until dinner. So I literally eat the exact same things. I just copy and paste my nutrition log every day until dinner time, and then I write in something new. So dinner has been varied. I don't really know what to say other than that. I've been focusing on the macros and not on the electrolytes that it might contain and things like
Oh yeah,
that. And
that's
or there's a lot of salt in this and maybe less in that or whatever. I've just really been focusing on keeping the macros where I want them to be. And given that the first part of the day is the same all the time, that pretty much means that my dinner macros are also
the
in
same.
line, similar, the same. I mean, I might replace a little fat with a little carbs depending on the night, but mostly,
Gotcha.
the caloric total is the same.
Understood. And then training wise, have you noticed the drop off this week in reps, anything like that? Are those still holding strong?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, yesterday I did my pendulum, and pendulum was the past few weeks I've been kind of oscillating between 7 and 8 reps with 3 plates, and yesterday I got 9. And then I also added, the first exercise I do is leg extensions before the pendulum, and I added a pound to each set, and I added a rep. This is the first time in 4 weeks that I didn't just add a pound and then match reps, but I added a pound and added a rep. So it was more improvement on both movements than I've made in 5 weeks or something like that. So that stuff's all going well. Chest is the only muscle group that I've lost strength on, and this is exactly what happened in my last diet too. My dumbbell fly press, which is my kind of metric movement for chest, throughout the last 6+ months. In off season, I was hitting it 85 for 10, and I was able to sustain 9 for most of the diet, and then last week it dropped to 8. So I've lost 2 reps on fly press. I've lost a rep on incline press, which follows fly press. And I think I lost a rep on weighted push-ups, which I thought was odd because I weigh less, but I'm sure there was just that increased fatigue from the prior movements, and I don't really think too much about it. But yeah, chest overall is just the first thing to go for me for whatever reason. I just always lose strength there. And then, axially loaded lower body movements, specifically quad ones, I tend to lose quickly, or at least noticeably. Like when I used to back squat, I would always be weaker as I would get smaller, just having less mass to come out of the hole with and stuff like that. But with the machine-based stuff, like with my hack press machine and with the pendulum and the leg extension and stuff, it's been, business as usual. So pretty happy about that. RDLs are feeling a little heavier. Like I would say I'm upset with myself because I actually haven't followed like a very Bryan programming style with my RDLs. Like I did 4 or 5 weeks of straight bar hip banded, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try trap bar. So then I did like 4 or 5 weeks of like trap bar hip banded, and then just this last week I went back to straight bar again. And so I'm just kind of like, I don't know whether I'm losing strength or not on RDLs. Like I probably am, which is probably why I keep changing movements, because I'm like, oh, that felt really hard, I don't want to do that. But yeah, man, it's, training motivation is low. And this is at least before training. Once you get into training and I do like my warm-up sets and stuff, like I'm good to go. But like the morning driving Bryson to school and then kind of like sipping on my element thing and like mentally preparing for the session, I'm just kind of like, oh, like I could take a rest day today and I could just get extra steps in, and I kind of like start negotiating in my head a little bit. And those are things that like I never do in the off season. Like when I'm fully fed, I'm like, yes, I get to go to the gym. This is awesome, So I think I even mentioned this on the last episode, that when I start feeling diet fatigue, it's not like I'm like really, really hungry or really weak or that my training is really impacted. And it's just motivation. And that's what happens to me too when I'm at the end of a mesocycle and I know it's a deload week. It's not like I'm getting weaker and I'm like, well, fuck, I need to deload now because I'm getting weaker. It's just like, I don't really want to go to the gym right now. Like I've been beating it for like 6 to 8 weeks. I think I need to take a step back and do a deload. So for me, it's always mental before it's physical. And I think if I get to the point that it's physical, then I've gone further than I usually go.
Yeah, then it's kind of time. You're warranted a deload or something like that. One thing I noticed at the end of my diet when how I realized I had that fatigue. I'm one of those people, I don't know why, I just like run up the steps all the time. I like bounce up the steps, and I found myself just kind of like slowly like mopping up the steps, and like my legs felt a little heavy. And then it was like literally one of those days I was like, I feel the diet fatigue. Like I'm like moving up the steps like at a slower pace. I'm not even crossing my mind to like run up them normally. And I was like, I can feel my legs feel a little heavy. Like I can feel it. But that was really the only time that I felt it, this most recent time. And that's, I don't know. I think when you can load a lot of vegetables, when you know how to play the game, when you are really invested in the outcome and, kind of shift that perception or that identity of who you are, it does become much, easier in that regard. But like everything else, you are going to run into that physiological response, and that's
eventually
will manifest in a different way in different people.
Yeah. The running up the stairs thing is really interesting because I actually think that both hills and stairs are way more cumbersome to walk up them at any point in life, whether I'm like fully fed, dieted, in a wheelchair. Like it doesn't really matter. Like going up a hill slowly or upstairs slowly, it just drains me. Like I would so much rather bound up that thing, get to the top and be like, whew, that was a good one, and then just kind of like keep going. So Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. Those are just made me think of that. And then another thing I thought of is, Steve Hall, the Revive Stronger guy. He was just talking about how he's been dieting this whole time and he's in contest shape right now. He's been dieting on 26 to 2,800 calories on his low days. He's been having 3,500 calories on it to 4,000 calories on his refeed days, and he's 174 pounds on stage right now.
How long has it been?
He said it started end of May, so he's 1 month later than I was, and he's leaner than I am.
That's pretty good. That's really good. How I know I was trying to, is he, or I know he was doing the walking with the weighted vest thing.
Yes.
Is that something he's carried throughout his prep?
Yeah, so not only is he doing the weighted vest thing and walking, he said an average of 15K steps a day, which is more or less what I'm hitting too. But he has been wearing a weighted vest 10 to 12 hours a day since the beginning of prep. And he did a progressive build where he started at 5 kilos and then went half the day with 5 kilos and half the day with 10 kilos. And then he went up to 10 kilos. And I think he's been at 10 kilos for a couple months now, which is a big vest to be wearing 10 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah, it's like what, 22 and change pounds.
Yeah.
10 to 12 hours. That's your waking hours pretty much.
Yeah, he said he only takes it off for posing and for working out.
What I would be interested in is, so one thing that's like really interesting is whenever I wear a weighted vest, like my traps are killing me just from supporting it. And I wonder like the adaptation you get from that, or even maybe, I'm hesitant to say hypertrophy, but there's some adaptation that's going to go on with your traps to be able to wear it that long.
Yeah, well, he did say that he noticed like his upper back was getting sore, at first, and I think he had to do something to mitigate that along the way. I think that's why he ended up going with I think he originally made a jump from 5 kilos to 10 kilos and it messed him up. So then he backtracked and did like the half day at 5 kilos and half day at 10 kilos thing. But he did say like his upper back volume dropped, I believe, because he was just feeling like super tight and sore in his upper back. So yeah, maybe an adaptation there. I also wonder like reversely if you could get any slow twitch conversion in any of those muscles up there because you're now doing this thing all the time, if it just becomes like the way your muscles receive the signal. So it's like you're doing this like highly endurance activity for the musculature instead of this more like targeted hypertrophy stimulus. So I don't really know. I mean, he looks great on stage, so whatever he did, it seems to be working fine.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It's like newer stuff that you don't hear about as much.
Yeah, for sure.
My initial thought is I'm not sure if I would rather just eat a little bit less food or wear a weight vest for 12 hours for 4 months. But it is a cool like experiment thing for him to see completely through.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best factors that I had going for me in this diet is that I just kind of did it along with life. Like I didn't really have to think about the fact that I was dieting. I just kind of lived life as I was dieting, right? And if you have this weighted vest on all the time, aside from the fact that, okay, so you get to eat maybe a couple hundred more calories or not or whatever, but now you're like constantly aware that you're dieting. Like at every moment you're like, oh, weight vest, dieting, oh, restriction, like, oh, this is annoying, like I want to take this off, right? So there's like this stimulus that's just constantly beating you down and like putting you in a negative space maybe. So I think for me, kind of to your point, like I don't know if that would work with like my mentality and the way that I approach dieting, as if it's just kind of like operating in the background.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have a little bit of an update from my standpoint.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I'm still not like, I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm not excited about it whatsoever, but it has been something that's been brewing for a while, and I've finally decided to deal with it. So as we've talked about multiple times in the podcast, my digestion has always been kind of like, kind of iffy at best. It's why I don't really like going out to eat. I don't do a lot of variation because it's like easily kind of upsets my stomach. And then with the lifestyle, with the travel and all the countries we lived in, I got bacterial infections in every single one we moved to. So over the past, since January 19, intestinal infection in Vietnam, 2 in Bali, 1 in Colombia, which was gnarly because we were with a bunch of locals, and they all got it too. So you know it's
man.
bad when the people that live there got it. Peru, 2 in Mexico. So I think I'm at 8. And there might be one place I can't remember. So that's like, 8 times in the last 2.5 years that I think only 2 of them I've actually gone on antibiotics for, but it's just like a bunch of different bacteria in there. And now what I most recently discovered was like a protein powder that I had been using for, over a year. All of a sudden I couldn't digest anymore. Dimetize, yeah. So I do think there is a little bit more to this because I have found 3 of my clients who also all of a sudden can't digest it well. And then I put something out on my Instagram and had 6 other people message me about it too. So I actually reached out to Dimetize. I'm going to follow up to them. I think it could possibly be a supplier change or something along those lines, but I think there may be a little bit more of an N of 1 type of deal there.
That's really interesting because you actually got me drinking Dimetize, and I've just been buying that shit off the shelf since I basically have whey and Gatorade as my first feedings of the day. Haven't noticed any issues yet. I'm wondering if maybe I shouldn't order a new thing of it or not. I don't know. It seems to be fine so far, but
yeah,
interesting. All right, continue.
Yeah, what I noticed is it started in late July, August, in that time frame. And I followed up with everyone. I was like, when was the last time you bought one type of deal? But I'll follow up with Dimetize. They actually emailed me back this morning, so I will kind of follow up there. But anyway, I talked to my coach, and it's something we've talked about a little bit before. And he's like, we're in a good spot. Body composition's great. Let's just put away 2 to 3 months and focus on, fixing the gut type deal. So going through a gut protocol there, it's different because we have to reduce carbohydrate to a large degree. You increase fat intake by a large amount because the majority of your digestive intolerances, not like allergies or anything like that, intolerances are going to be carbohydrate based because the carbohydrates can ferment in the small intestine and the large intestine, feed bacteria in there, both good and bad. And then this is what produces, methane, flatulence, gas type of thing. They also produce hydrogen in certain circumstances as well. So switch up in my diet, and it's been interesting because I'm like, okay, I'm not at starting over, but I'm like, I need to restructure how I think about my day, how I, design everything. And one thing that I find is I'm like, okay, I'm going to get some more nuts, seeds, chia seeds, ground flaxseed, Brazil nuts. But a lot of these nuts and seeds and stuff also have carbohydrate. Same thing with avocado. So it's harder when you go with in my opinion at least, when you go with the higher fat approach because a majority of your fats also contain carbohydrates.
Cheese.
Dairy.
Yeah.
I can't do cheese because I'm lactose intolerant.
There's no lactose in cheese. It's casein.
Some cheeses there's smaller amounts of lactose in.
Okay.
I just pulled this up for a client yesterday and sent him a list. I can't remember the ones off the top of my head. Some are lower, but I've never been a big cheese person anyway, and it's something like casein I don't do well with at all. Okay. So those are things I definitely don't want to add it because I know I don't digest them well.
Yeah, that's tough then because cheese is always my go-to when I need fat.
Yeah, so fortunately I have these really good olive oils that are infused. So I'll be adding that on stuff, but it's definitely going to be a lower volume of food, and just kind of restructuring my eating design. But I'm committed right to the protocol that we're going to run and hopefully just get my digestion in a better spot. Because like I said, it was always pretty iffy, and then just all the travel just fucked me up.
Right.
So taking the time back and just going to, we reduced training, only 4 days per week. I'm going to add in a yoga on Tuesday nights, which is tonight. We found a really cool class, which is you basically just lay on the ground for an hour and this lady just says nice things about you. So I'm like, I'll fucking go to that.
It's like yin yoga, you just stretch.
Yeah. Nice. So I'll do that and then just take it day by day, week by week, see how things progress, and hopefully.
What are your macros now?
Protein is still high this week, 285, and fats are 100 and 105 on training and rest days, and then protein came down to 230. or sorry, carbs.
Yeah.
Came down to like 230 on training days and then 130 on rest days.
I actually don't really think that that's like ridiculously low. I mean,
Well, this is just first week. It'll probably continue to
you think
shift.
it'll go.
Yeah.
So, one thing you can do, and I know you've probably thought of this, but the exciting thing is you can have like fattier meats.
I don't enjoy them.
Really?
Yeah.
Like a marbled filet mignon or something like that.
Well, like a fillet, I will say I enjoy, or like a tenderloin. Tenderloin's
Yeah,
pretty lean,
tenderloins,
actually.
filet, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, those I do, but like a ribeye. If to be
No,
completely
it's too
honest,
fatty. Yeah.
I'm cutting it out. I just don't enjoy it.
No, I don't eat the fat chunks at all.
Yeah.
I don't do that either. I eat the stuff. But when you get a fillet, or like sometimes tri-tips are marbled too, and
Tri-tip.
like, but I also I can find I prefer lean tri-tips, at least dieting, but there are fattier tri-tips that are fantastic. And you could have like chicken thighs. You can cook them in garlic butter sauce. I mean, that sounds amazing. So
Yeah,
or olive oil if you don't
it,
have butter,
it does
yeah.
open things up for sure. It's for a lot of that stuff with like the making meats and better. It's the time commitment I don't want. Like, okay, I need 6 pounds of chicken. I don't want to like make 3 at a time in this garlic butter thing where I'm like redoing it every serving. And now I've been cooking chicken for 45 minutes. But
I get that.
yeah, it does open me up for things. And one thing I do like is it gives me a new avenue to produce solutions for clientele, because like there's clients who come to me who have like digestive issues, right? And we need to go with a lower carbohydrate approach. And now I have more examples of these are types of meals. Like, let's incorporate these sorts of foods. So it just puts me back in the driver's seat to create new solutions.
Yep,
And that is
for sure.
That is a standpoint I always like.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, it's good to hear that you're getting some solutions to this thing, because 8 bacterial infections in 2.5 years is a lot of sickness.
It's a lot.
But I'm guessing that you would be able to handle COVID pretty well. Like, no big deal after all
Yeah,
that.
I would like to think my body is, the whole kind of if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, I use my immune system a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's ready to go. Speaking of, I think my mom might have it, which is actually really kind of a shame, but she's doing okay. She feels okay because she got vaccinated.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Not good. She has.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think honestly, I really think everyone's just gonna get it. Let's not make this a COVID episode, but I think eventually everyone's just gonna get COVID, and that's just how it's gonna have to happen. Okay. Do you want to talk about strength cycles?
Let's talk about getting strong.
All right, cool. So just to give everyone an update in case you missed the episode, I think it was like 2 episodes ago where we introduced this. We were kind of talking about my plan, because I've been dieting for a really long time now. And as I've been dieting, I've kind of gotten what I called hypertrophy fatigue, which basically just means that I've been training hypertrophy for like 3+ straight years with no breaks. Like, I haven't done an Oli cycle, I haven't done a strength cycle, I've taken like a week or 10 days off here and there, but yeah, basically just training hypertrophy straight ahead. And we have the data-driven guys coming on next week, which I'm really excited about. They do some hypertrophy work as well, but they're primarily focused in the strength realm of things. And they're the guys that really focus a lot on the idea that you don't have to go close to failure, that you can use increased volume with lower proximity to failures and get essentially the same stimulus, especially for strength work. And we've kind of briefly discussed this on other episodes too, where like strength is such a neural adaptation. And when you do a rep that's like a grinding, like failure type rep, you're inevitably going to engage some unintended musculature as like a compensatory effect as you're working through the sticking points. So if we can kind of do our movements where there almost like isn't a sticking point, and we're always focusing on rep speed out of the hole or whatever the bottom position is of a movement, then we can essentially keep velocity high and keep the neural priming system, etc. I don't exactly know what to call it. We'll get the data-driven guys to talk about this more next week. But essentially, you just can get really strong by doing something like 7 sets of 3 with 8 RM. So you take a weight you could do 8 times, but you only do it 3 times, and then you do that for 7 sets, right? And that way you ensure that your movement patterns are crisp and all that good stuff. That's kind of the idea I want to take into some of the strength work that I'm doing here. So the way that I've designed, actually, let me backtrack one little bit and continue my update. So the 29th of September, I'm getting snipped, and then I'm going to take a week off. During that week off, I'm going to eat a lot of food and really focus on recovery. This will allow me about 2 weeks of time since the diet ended, because I'll have the week off of the gym plus kind of the final week where I'm eating up into it. And then I'll have an intro week after that. So I think October 6th or whatever will probably be the point, 7th, something like that, will be the point where I will start week 1. And it'll be like an intro week where I'll just kind of like lightly go through the movements and reintroduce my body to what a low bar back squat feels like, what a conventional deadlift feels like, things like that. And then after that week, so maybe the week like of October 12th, 13th, something like that, then I kind of start getting into actual structure of work weeks where I think the strength movements, like my back squat and my deadlift, I am going to take that more prudent, like 7 sets of 3 approach. I really do want to do, I was talking to Aaron before the show, I really want to do more research into designing a strength cycle. So what I've laid out right now is what I would call like V1, the alpha version of my full body strength program. But as it stands right now, my first day is a low bar back squat, a conventional deadlift, a pause dumbbell bench press, and a barbell curl. And so the first 2 movements will be definitely, actually the first 3 will be done for sure. The pause incline bench press as well will be done with like 7 sets of 3 or probably 7 sets of 5 or something like that. Whatever it is, it's going to be lower effort, shy of failure. And then on day 2, which will be 2 days later because I'll have a rest day in between, I have a little more hypertrophy focus for the legs. So I'm going to do leg curls and pendulum squat. And I think I'll still probably be within like 2 to 3 reps of failure on those, and probably just increase volume slightly from what I've been doing because I'll be, 3 reps from failure instead of more or less at failure. And then I have a chest supported row and a barbell overhead press tentatively in there. For anyone that follows along on my story, I tried overhead pressing again like a couple weeks ago with dumbbells thinking it would feel better, and it really felt awful and my shoulder kind of grinded the whole way through. So I tentatively wrote in strict overhead press, but I'm going to have to mess around with hand position. I was talking to Abel, or what Abel was saying is that he also feels grindy when he's like in here, which is how I used to press, kind of like, shoulder width, elbows down. And he said when he took it out like a little bit wider out here and then started doing his presses like that he had no shoulder issue. And that's something I've never tried because I don't feel strong out there. So
you're talking about a barbell, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm going to have to mess around with overhead press, and I don't know what I'm going to do if overhead press is out. I don't know what I'm going to throw in there. I'm going to have to think about it. And then my third day is back to doing back squats again. So it's a back squat on like day 1 and then again on day 5. And then it's a RDL because I don't do well with conventional deadlifting twice a week. I've tried it a couple times in cycles and stuff, and it just doesn't work for me. I feel beat up all the time. So I'm going to do a RDL on the second day with back squat. And then I tentatively have in a dumbbell fly press, a 1-arm pull down, and like a dumbbell tricep extension or something. I was trying to choose the accessory movements that aren't like back squat deadlift. I was trying to choose ones that are conducive to doing a little bit more volume with further proximity from failure. And I feel like, when you get into things like push downs and cable curls and stuff like that, like it just doesn't feel like anything unless you go close to failure. But when you do, like, you can take a tricep extension or like a dumbbell press or something like that, and you can get something out of like 8 sets of 6 to 8 or something like that, with a 12 to 15 RM or something along those lines. So I think they're a little bit more conducive to just the goal of the cycle, but I'm also open to the fact that programming strength cycles is not my forte, and that I do intend to do more research into this over the next 2 weeks, and especially I think the week leading up to my first week, because I'll essentially be on the couch without working out for a week. I'll literally have nothing to do except listen to podcasts and read about ways that I should design my upcoming strength cycle. So I think what we should do is probably revisit this topic in like early October, once I've actually got my head wrapped around a little more, and after we've talked to Zach and Josh on next week's episode. And who knows, maybe this thing looks like completely different, and we have a lot more kind of intelligent things to say on the matter.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Unfortunately, mine's probably going to get kicked down the timeline a little bit. I probably won't be able to start it till maybe sometime in November or even early December. But it is something I'm excited for, because I haven't really taken it from an angle that I plan on, with the knowledge that I have now.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to, I mean, there's also one thing is like, it feels cool to feel strong sometimes. And that's something that I haven't really experienced in a while. Like a lot of times I'm using weights that are like, 30-40% less than I've done before. Granted, a different, stimulus, generally different rep cadence, etc. But it will be kind of cool just to see if I can get back to some of those numbers. And a different type of style of training I'm excited for as well. Yeah. And to see what it does with physique stuff as also.
Yeah, I don't really think it's going to have any effect. Someone asked me about that. I think Jeremiah Bear asked me about it when I was on his podcast recently. And he's like, do you think the strength cycle is going to have positive impacts on your hypertrophy training? And I thought about it for a second. And I was like, I don't really. Like, So what we ended up talking about on the podcast, which is actually kind of interesting, but just to give you like the novella version, the way that N1 kind of designs their strength cycles is like they usually stay in the hypertrophy zone. They just stay on the lower side of it. So like one example was like 6 sets of 6 on a back squat, but you're increasing weight every set, where it's like 4 to 5 RIR on the first set, and then on the last set it's like a 0 to 1 RIR. So you're getting like one like really, really hard work set, but there's also a lot of like effective sets on the way up there as well. So it's actually kind of a lot of volume too.
A lot of volume.
And so, yeah, and then Jeremiah was saying that they also will do like, 6 sets of 4, which again, same idea where you're building each set. Like, yeah, 4 is a little bit below that kind of hypertrophy threshold, but it's like, it's not sets of 1 to 3. And then you're also doing 6 sets of 4, so you're getting like 24 reps in there, and they're relatively close to failure. So whether it's 6 sets of 6 or 6 sets of 4 or 6 sets of 8 or something like that, they're staying in the lower end of the hypertrophy range a lot of the time. And the way that I want to design this cycle is to start with something like triples, and then progressively as I go, potentially end up with doubles and maybe even some singles. So in that type of design, I really just don't see it having a whole lot of transfer into hypertrophy. I don't think it's going to affect my ability to do more reps with my 12 RM, and I also don't think it's going to necessarily build any muscle mass either. But I think that what it might do is provide me a little more motivation when I get back to hypertrophy training, because I won't have just been doing hypertrophy training forever. And it may potentially allow a little bit of resensitization. So if I've been training hypertrophy for 3 years, then my body's pretty well damn adapted to hypertrophy, and maybe taking a little bit of time not training hypertrophy could somehow stimulate some sort of resensitization effect, and maybe I get like a little jump in the beginning. But I don't think long term that there's any tangible difference as a result of doing a strength cycle like this.
I would agree with that from my initial understanding of what I have now. That being said, I do have hope, and this is something we briefly talked about when we had Eric Helms on the show, is that all of this hypertrophy work and adding some extra tissue to those areas may help us in our strength endeavors.
For sure. I actually was thinking about that this morning, because I guess I have a little bit of trepidation and call it even anxiety about the numbers that I used to hit. Because, like, okay, I want to check my ego this cycle and I want to try and do this thing that's staying shy of failure and not having those, like, really grindy reps that oftentimes cause, like, a low back tweak or, like, whatever it is, especially as I get older. So I really want to check my ego. And I feel like when I know that, like, you and I talked about this and we're like, oh man, well, I hit a 405 triple on back squat 5 years ago. So now on this cycle, like, is my expectation that I'm supposed to hit like a 405 triple on back squat? Because things are different now. Like, the way I execute movement is different. I'm not training in a CrossFit gym where at all times there's like 12 people yelling at me to make sure that I do the rep that I really, really don't want to do. And so I don't know, there's like kind of all these factors going into it. And I don't want to set myself up to be extremely disappointed at the end of this. So there, I guess trepidation would be the right word. I'm excited about it, but I don't want to get caught in this mindset of chasing old numbers.
I agree with that. I guess for me, there are some that I think are potentially not really attainable again, and then others that I think are, and that kind of gives me. I feel like I'm splitting the fence type of deal. Like deadlift, I feel confident I can go PR a deadlift. Overhead press, I feel confident in that as well. Back squat, I really don't think I stand a chance. And it's just because, like, even in those days, like the back squat, progress was so hard for me to make, and the others really weren't as hard. That I feel like now it's only going to be that same scenario will just be exacerbated by age and being a little bit more wise, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I might even call it timid. Like
That's a great term to use as well.
I just don't want to. Like, I couldn't in my dungeon gym. I don't know if y'all have seen this, but I have like this power rack thing that's like one of those slanted ones, and then it has these little arms at the bottom that are maybe like 6 inches long. So if I have to bail a back squat in my dungeon gym, I don't know if I'm gonna survive, and some of my equipment probably won't survive. So I don't I will not fail a squat. Like, I remember on that last cycle I did where I got to 405 by 3, there were a couple times at the end where I did have to bail out back squats. And that's something that I think I'd like to keep in my past.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Just no point, man. No point.
Yeah. So moving on from that, the one thing I did want to talk about is kind of what we were just talking about. Like, as we are getting, we're deep into being basically advanced in our training careers, right? Some things that basically we just need to allocate more time to for these specialization type cycles. So, for example, right, chest specialization for an entire year, as opposed to, like, if you are 20 years old and you're new training, you might do like an 8-week chest specialization cycle, and you might make like, tons of progress in those 8 weeks. But at this point, where we've probably put on 95% of the amount of muscle mass we will put on at the chest or whatever localized area, probably not us for our legs, which is why we spend a lot of time training them, right? We might just need to dedicate much more time to that. So is there anything with, just tell me, what are your thoughts about with that?
Yeah, so this idea kind of came out of a podcast I was listening to from our buddy Dave McConey, who was on here in episode 4 or whatever it was. We've referenced that before. And he had a guy on who actually proposed this idea. He was like, I don't understand how anybody that's been training longer than 10 years would do something and then not commit to it for like at least a year. Because you're like already at the point where you're going to have to struggle tooth and nail to make any gains at all. So, like, if you commit to do something, you can't expect to see any tangible change in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, half a year, or whatever. He's like, you got to commit to this for a longer time. And I thought about it. And it is an interesting idea. It's like when you look at the notion of training for the rest of your life. I mean, shit, I've been training 25 years. If I've been training 25 years with no specialization, basically. I just kind of do the same amount of volume for the most part, or what I need. I basically do the amount of volume that I need or that I believe I need for each muscle group each week. So if I need 14 sets for back, I do 14 sets. If I need 7 sets for biceps, I do 7 sets. I never have really taken my volume in any specific muscle group up above and beyond what is kind of my determined amount that I need. They've all just kind of been balanced. So this idea of like flipping the balance, right? So when you look at training for the rest of your life, if I have another 20 years of quality training in me, or even 15, I could do a year of chest specialization, and then the rest of the 14 years, I just kind of put chest on like maintenance level, and it just kind of, I maintain those adaptations that were gained in the year of specialization. And then you choose a new muscle group and say, this year I'm focusing on quads. And then after that, quad volume kind of drops and whatever. The idea being that like you literally spend that year building up that muscle group by making that your priority over the other ones. And since we know that maintenance volume is significantly lower, at least in the short term, than it is to gain, and we know that from the conversation with Helms that for a longer period of time, you can take volume down to, he said, he thinks long term you could do 40 to 50% of the volume is I believe what he said on the podcast, whereas the studies are showing 1/9 of the volume. But I think the 1/9, what he was saying is like, this is a short term study. He's like, for long term, 40 to 50% of what you were doing to gain is probably sufficient. So you were needing 14 sets for back. Well, after your back year specialization where you do 25 sets, now you just do 7. After a year of 25 sets, now you're doing 7 for back for the next 5 years. And you just kind of maintain what you gained during that year of doing 25 sets. And this is like a really mature way of looking at training, right? Like for you to take a muscle group and specialize in that muscle group for a year, like if you're new to training and you did that, you would have a lopsided physique. Like that year of specializing in that muscle group would create like distortion in one area of your body. For me, I could specialize in a muscle group for a year, and to the untrained eye, or maybe even to the trained eye, it might look like nothing happened. So I think it's a really interesting idea that as your training age goes, that you do organize your training in some manner somewhat similar to this, where there is a prioritization effect. Yeah? What do you think of that?
I really like it. And I think why I like it is because I find myself that I've spent literally the last year plus focusing on my legs. I don't really know how much changed. I think they're better, but not by like leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And I think it might be one of those things is right, another thing that happens with your training age as it increases, you have like imbalances, things that you just inherently are better at than others, mind muscle connection, all these different things. And it's not like everything grows at a proportional rate, because that would assume that you can perform every movement as quality as other ones, maybe joint injuries, all these different things. And it's how you can kind of like balance things out as you get deeper into your training age. And that's kind of where we're finding ourselves now. Like I just said, I spent a year on my legs. I could probably spend another 3 there, to be completely honest, and hope that they would bring up to like back delts, type of deal.
Do you feel like as you specialized in legs this year that you had to drop volume for the upper body regions?
From a like just not so much a recovery standpoint, but just from like a time and being realistic with myself.
So were you doing less though? Like would you say your upper body received less volume this year than it did in prior years?
Yeah, especially because I was training legs 3 times a week for a couple, for a couple months. And even on those I would do 2 upper body days. Those days just get long. Trying to train your entire upper body, even if you're just doing like one exercise for like biceps and triceps, doing like 2 for chest, a vertical and a horizontal pull for back, a lateral delt. You're now at 5 exercises. It's just time consuming. I'm talking an hour and 40-minute gym session type thing. And after a while, you're just like, I love the gym, but after like an hour and 40 of minutes of being in there training, like I just kind of want to fucking go home.
Yeah, so this is interesting because you spent a year essentially prioritizing your legs, and yet you did less volume for your upper body and didn't lose anything in your upper body. I can say for sure from seeing the pictures. And I would even say that you added mass in your delts and possibly some other areas, maybe a little bit on the lats or back. So I would say for sure your physique didn't go backwards in your upper body by doing less, and it still moved forward.
I would agree with that. And a lot of that too, I will say, comes from like I dramatically improved movement execution kind of across the board. And that's one of those things that as you do it more or do it longer, or really take the time to learn from people and remove your ego from it and realize that, even though I've trained for 16, 17 years, there's a lot I still don't have a fucking clue about. I was able to really push forward just by admitting that I don't know what I don't know.
Yep. Cool. Well, that's awesome, because I think that is a testament to this idea of specialization. And then fortuitously, Alberto Nunez just posted on his story yesterday a picture of him flexing like a kind of most muscular, and he goes, "This whole year has been spent on delt and arm specialization." And he goes, "I think it's working, but my legs also grew." and like fuck, man. Like he was basically saying like my legs are my strong point, so like no matter what I do, like the legs still grow, which is kind of like us in our upper bodies. Like I really believe that with the execution style that we have right now, that we really could go to like a minimum effective volume for the whole upper body. Like I could probably do 4 to 6 sets for most upper body areas per week, and probably 20 to 30 sets for legs. And like I don't think I would lose anything on my upper body. I mean, I would probably have to try it to be sure, but this is an interesting idea, and I've been meaning to do a specialization cycle just in general because I haven't done one before. And so this is something that I'm definitely considering for after the strength cycle is over. Kind of seeing how I feel at that point, but potentially designing a cycle that really does prioritize 1 or 2 muscle groups. Maybe it's quads and hams, or it's chest and triceps, biceps. I don't know, one of the two. But anyway, yeah, those are some interesting ideas, and we'll have to kind of touch base and revisit it as we go.
Yeah, that's something after the strength cycle I would like to definitely do as well. So we'll
cool.
Cool to talk
I
about.
dig that. Well, we'll have to do one together. Maybe we'll both do legs, since that just seems to be the thing.
Seems to be appropriate for you and I, yeah.
Fucking Alberto Nunez and his God-gifted legs. Cool. Do you want to jump into the last topic?
Yeah, we will. And especially because it's something that really, so basically the topic is muscle soreness, right? And then what it means, how you can interpret it, and how it can be used as a mechanism to enhance your training. So what happens far too often is people think that like if you're super freaking sore, that means you had like the best workout, you crushed yourself, and you're going to like facilitate all these new gains, where it's probably a little bit of the opposite. You probably pushed yourself way too hard, under-recovered, overtrained, underate, maybe you're dehydrated, missing electrolytes, sorts of things, and you actually kind of set yourself back a little bit because now you need to postpone your next training session until you're recovered, which is now usually an extra day, 2, 3, 4 days, etc. As I talked a little bit earlier in the episode about my training has shifted because I'm now we need to reduce stress on the body. So training's coming down to 4 days, not doing any intensity techniques or whatever. And it's kind of just a little bit more of straightforward, kind of a lot of the rep ranges actually, like you briefly brought up around the N1 strength cycle. So it's a lot of like most exercises I would say are like 6 to 8 reps. Some at like 10, maybe lateral delts at like 12, but everything else is generally in that 6 to 8. So I had leg press, and I was excited to use the leg press that I had hated for years because I now found a way to not hate it. So I was like, okay, this is like my only, or I had one other quad exercise, which was like, split squats with like at the end. So I was like, I'm going to push the leg press here a little bit. I want to make sure I get a good leg stimulus because obviously it's still my goals, my legs and that sort of thing. So I put it on there and I end up like pushing just, I guess, a little bit too hard. I got through my 4 sets of 6. I didn't fail anything and everything was about like a 1 RIR, but it was challenging. And then I did the split squats, which I did them with lightweight. I think I only did like 25s in each hand, but I did like really driving the knee forward, right? I woke up the next day in a world of fucking pain. And that was on I did that on Saturday, and I was supposed to, train my train legs again yesterday on Monday, and I had to flop it and I couldn't. Or sorry, no, that was on Friday. I'm sorry. I trained legs on Friday and I was supposed to get on Monday, and like they were still super sore yesterday.
Yeah.
So it was just goes to show, like when you change something or when you kind of push too hard out of the gate, it's like I immediately knew. I was like, oh wow, I fucked up.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely going to need an extra probably like 2 days to recover before I can go into this. And it's something like, I'm training regularly. I train my legs very, very hard, but just that shift in rep range or something like that I wasn't really prepared for, and poorly gauging my weights, to be completely honest, wrecked me.
Yeah, this is why one of the reasons why soreness is just an awful indicator of whether you had a good session or not, because the repeated bout effect basically says that if you do something over and over and over again, your body adapts to it and you become less sore. So if you continue doing 4 sets of 6 on leg press and then the same version of split squats each time that you do this leg day, each week or whatever, you will get progressively less sore, but that doesn't mean that they're working less effectively. In fact, it probably means they're working more effectively, because right now you're in that area that we always talk about where it's the neural adaptation phase, where you're just learning movements, you're trying a new rep range, you're learning how to brace, you're learning how to explode out of the bottom of a split squat and engage. These are things that you get better at because they're a skill. The neural adaptation period, right? So that is one reason. I always say that soreness, it can tell you that you did too much, but it can't really tell you anything else. It can't tell you that you had a quality session. It can tell you that you stimulated the muscle. Like, good work, you fucked that muscle up. Like, you definitely worked it. That's cool. But it doesn't tell you that you didn't. It can't tell you that you did enough, right? Like, you can still have done enough but not be sore. So also on Jeremiah's podcast that I was on a couple of days ago or a week ago or whatever, he asked me, what are the things that I like to use to kind of identify a quality session? And I went through the normal things, like, you do want to get a pump, like at least if you're not in an extreme deficit, like you should get a pump while you train. You probably shouldn't lose your pump while you train. Like, those are probably decent ideas to look at. I don't think they're great, but they're something. Soreness, like, yeah, you want to like feel your muscles and know that like something happened, but you don't want to be debilitated to the point where you have to flip flop sessions or you can't walk for days, right? But the one that I really, really do like, and I think that as I've worked with clients over the last like 6 months or whatever, the idea of disruption over the day. So I think it's different to look at disruption like immediately post-workout, which I think is also important. So this is the idea of like, oh, I just did a big upper body day and like now it like is weird to wash my hair in the shower afterwards or something. Or I just did legs and now I have to walk upstairs and I'm like hobbling or whatever, right? These are like the immediate effects of the workout. But I proposed the idea that maybe looking at the way that you feel 3 or 4 hours after the workout is a very important metric. And as I kind of have gone through it over the last 6 months, I've found more and more correlation to quality sessions from disruption a few hours later. So this isn't like the same feeling that you get 20 minutes after where you literally can't walk upstairs or you feel weird, washing your hair. But it's the idea of like, it's 3 or 4 hours later and I still like am walking up the stairs and I feel something. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of tension in my quad. Like, I didn't really expect that. Or, you go to grab something off a top shelf and you feel like, a little bit of fatigue through your like lat or shoulder or whatever. I mean, these are very subtle signs and you have to be like very tuned in with your body. But I think that anybody that trains hard can relate to those sentiments and look at that disruptive feeling and be able to say like, yeah, that is something that I do feel kind of as the day progresses. So that isn't soreness. I just thought it was important to kind of go on that tangent and talk about something that is a good training indicator, other than soreness. But as we kind of continue down the path of soreness, we know that muscle damage is closely related to soreness. And so when we are really sore, our body literally has to heal the damage before it can instigate MPS, muscle protein synthesis, and begin building. So there's MBS, right? Muscle breakdown. Is that right? There's
I'm
anyway.
not sure.
There's a muscle breakdown, and then there's a muscle protein synthesis. And muscle breakdown is what's occurring first and has to be healed before we can go into muscle protein synthesis. So that's the point of that. And therefore, if we are too sore, we're actually not going to maximize the effect of the muscle protein synthesis because it has to go through this process of healing first. So we're limiting the amount of time that we can be in positive nitrogen balance. Is that said right? Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not. I said I do not, and then I was immediately going to add something to it. And the only thing that I wanted to add is the downtime between training sessions too. Like if you do what I did, trained way too hard, you are too sore. Now you push back those leg sessions, and the more times that you do that, the more subsequent pushbacks you have, and then you're literally getting less volume in an X time frame because you need more recovery between sessions.
Yeah. And then I also can relate this to what I was talking about with my leg days a couple episodes ago, where I was training my legs again as soon as I wasn't sore. So I referenced how I would have the day after I'd be sore, then the second day after I'd feel like a little tightness and it was minorly sore. And then the third day I would pretty much not have anything. So I would train again the fourth day. And I was realizing that wasn't actually sufficient recovery for me. And I started making better progress when I pushed leg sessions to the fifth or the sixth day. So that's unique to me, of course, and I don't necessarily think that other people need to follow that. But those little kind of subtle things kind of lead me to believe that maybe the process of healing really doesn't begin for me until after the soreness has dissipated. I needed a full day or two where I wasn't sore before I could actually see progress the subsequent session. So something important also to keep in mind. And then the muscle protein thing I was talking about is MPB, muscle protein breakdown, and MPS, muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah. I think to kind of follow up with what you just said, it's something that listeners out there should just test, right? Give yourself an extra day and then see, okay, did I smash what I did the day before? There was something that, this is obviously completely subjective to me, but I remember when we were living in Mexico over the winter, and I ended up, we did a trip somewhere. I can't remember, a short weekend trip. And I ended up taking an extra 3 days off of training. And I came back on Monday to lift legs when I normally would have lifted them on Friday or Saturday. And I was able to add I did the same weight, but I added 6 reps or something like that, stupid. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. And that was during that time where I was training my legs 3 times per week. And just by having a 4 or 5 day gap in between, I was able to add a ton of progress.
You were super under recovered.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard at that. You're using the volume, game at that rate.
Well, that's the super compensation thing they talk about, where you just kind of push that edge. You're riding that red line and you're just trying not to fall off the edge. And then if you make it, then you take a few days off and suddenly super compensation occurs, and all that work that you put in is able to be manifested, which is pretty cool that it actually worked like that for you.
Yeah. But it was but again, it's one of those things I was a lot of times managing okay, my knees are a little bit achy, and that's the kind of, I don't want to say fear, but the risk there is joint integrity with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, sweet, dude. I think that was a good episode.
I do as well. So anything else you want to add on this one, Bryan?
No, man. I think next time we talk, I will be the day after a photo shoot and the day before going to see Alberto and Bryan. So next week will be the data-driven guys. We'll give a quick update, let you guys know where I am at with everything in that kind of intermediary day. And then I guess the following week, when we get on here, we'll be able to chat about my photo shoot and my time up there. And I'll be eating plenty. I'll be having a cheesesteak, and it will be messing Aaron's stomach up through the internet.
Yeah, through some weird internet osmosis. I'll have gut issues from your cheesesteak.
Yeah, I'll enjoy it for you.
Cool. All right, so as always, thanks for listening, guys. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.